Hi everybody, my name's Dayne and I'm joined with my good friend here, Billy. And we've got together because we want to record a couple of episodes looking at the idea of purgatory, both from a Catholic and from a Protestant perspective. So, Billy, would you be able to just quickly introduce yourself and just give us a real quick overview of what purgatory means and what it's about?
Hi, Dayne. To my viewers, my name is Billy. I'm delighted to be here today just to look at purgatory, Catholic view of what purgatory is. But to give you a bit of understanding, we need to understand that there is 3 points of view of the afterlife, if we want to call it. The one is called heaven, hell, and in between a state is called purgatory. And purgatory has 2 purposes, one of temporal punishment for sin, and the second is cleansing from the attachment of sin. Purgatory really purifies your soul before you get to heaven, because you cannot enter heaven until your soul is completely pure. It needs to be completely cleansed. Now, a really good example that the Catholic Church uses is they refer to sin in a way similar to a tumor. So a tumor in your body, somebody has a tumor, goes to a surgeon, the surgeon removes it, and that will be your sin, getting removed out of your body. But the surgery obviously leaves you scars and you need to have a bit of time to heal. And also there may be some remnants of that cancer that need to be treated with a bit of chemo or radiation, whatever it is. Now, if that is what we call little bits of sin left over. Now, purgatory helps you to, in that healing process, is that healing time. Is a place where you actually get rid of your sin completely, and then you're fully pure, feel completely getting rid of that tumor before you get to heaven. So when you get to heaven, you're free of any sin. That's pretty much on a nutshell what it is. But it's very important to point out what John Paul II says, that heaven, hell, and purgatory, they are the states of being of a spirit, of a human soul. They're not places. A lot of people think that there are places where you go, but no, it's the spirit or the human soul state. But then if you completely reject God out of your own free choice and you go against God, then that's when you go to eternal hell.
Yeah. Now, look, that's a really helpful summary, actually.
So, but Dayne, what do you reckon about the historical development of how all this came to be, this notion of a purgatory?
So Roman Catholics they'll often point out that history and church tradition actually supports their understanding of purgatory. So one of the earliest references to purgatory comes from a pre-Christian source known as Second Maccabees, which is an apocryphal book written during the intertestamental period, which Catholics, of course, include as part of their canon of scripture. So in this text, there is one reference to an occasion when some Jewish people are described as praying for the dead. And so whilst this isn't strictly evidence for purgatory per se, it does suggest that there was a time early on when Jewish people may have been praying for the dead. And what's interesting about this reference when you study it in further detail is that you realize very quickly that this incident of the Jewish people praying for the dead existed during quite a tumultuous time in Jewish history, where lots of political parties were fighting for dominance in Judea. And so this political ploy that happens is more exactly that, political than theological. And so Second Maccabees doesn't likely represent or doesn't likely record a widespread practice. This is likely an isolated matter. And so that's a really early Jewish source. But as we move forward into the Christian period, the church, of course, grew beyond its Christian heritage, where all sorts of pagan influences started creeping into the church. And paganism, of course, had all sorts of understandings on afterlife and on intercessory roles between the living and the dead. And so the early Gentile church definitely inherited some of these pagan traditions, and we see that through archaeology and history of Christians gathering around graves of martyrs and gathering in catacombs and that type of thing, so they could be close to their dead. And so it seems at some stage that reverent prayers often offered on behalf of martyrs, they very quickly seem to have changed into prayers for and toward the martyrs. And references that speak of this are texts such as the Martyrdom of Perpetua and Felicity, and also Tertullian. which are quite early, sort of 2nd, 3rd century sources. And this kind of continues throughout the early church period, all the way through to the Middle Ages, where purgatory becomes a bit more formalized and popularized through the works of Dante, through his elaborate map of Mount Purgatory. But of course, this is all without opposition, because we have Waldensians and the Hussites and a few other people sort of fighting against this, and not least of which, of course, are the reformers themselves. And ultimately, this doctrine was formalized by the Roman Catholic Church at the Council of Trent. So, yeah, we kind of have this movement from isolated, sporadic practices with a bit of pagan, bit of political, bit of different influences happening, through to it becoming formalized in the 16th century.
So, it's quite engaged in insert on the Catholic tradition, because it's obviously not just something that has been done since 600 after Christ or whatever, but it actually comes from the very roots of Christianity, and then there's little bits and pieces, and then obviously that over time has keep creeping in. It's very, very interesting. But I would like to talk to you a little bit more about the state of the dead, how Catholics see dead. Because we have this, when we die, we talked about this purgatory, hell, and heaven. And when you die, there is 2 different judgments. So a lot of Protestants will have what we call final judgment. But for Catholics, there is 2 judgments. One that is called a particular or individual judgment, and that happens when we died. And then there is another one that at the end of times, when Jesus returns, and that they call it a general judgment. In this general judgment, all our sins will be publicly revealed to everyone. So Augustine is probably the person for the Catholic Church that puts everything into a nutshell for them. And Augustine says it like this: temporary punishments are suffered by some in this life only, by others after death, by others both now and then, but all of them before the last strict judgment. So we have these 2 different judgments. The whole idea of the individual judgment is to get rid of sin, okay? They fully understand and believe that Jesus has removed what they call original sin out of our lives, and therefore he has justified at the beginning. But because we continue to sin, we need to be able to purify of that sin. And to do that, we need to give alms, we need to do works, we need to counteract what we've done in our lives to be able to do that. And that's purgatory gives you the opportunity that if you haven't been able to do that, you haven't been able to be a good person in this life. Purgatory gives you the opportunity to do it during purgatory, to be able to be cleansed of these tumors that we were talking about before. It is quite interesting because we have in this Catholic view of sanctification and justification, view that Jesus died for our original sins, as we were saying, and then the sacramental system helps you to cleanse of all the other sins by the restitution, by pilgrimages, by mass, by works, by rosaries, etc. And saints can give you merit. They build up merit, and they can give you some of that merit, and that's why you have to pay for it. You have to do things to be able to pay to the saints for the merit that you have taken from them. That's pretty much in a nutshell all bits and pieces, but I don't know if you have other thoughts on that you want to add up.
No, look, I just wanted to really quickly close this episode just on the point of how Protestants historically have responded to this teaching of purgatory. So we kind of need to throw back once again to the Reformation period, where there was this thing called the indulgence trade that was going on. And the indulgence trade was a mechanism through which someone was able to purchase an accelerated passage or perhaps even avoidance altogether of purgatory by paying an amount of money to the church. And so when Martin Luther came along, he found this practice theologically questionable at best. But the church was, of course, profiting off this scandal, and many of its clergy were becoming corrupt. And so Martin Luther, in his 95 Thesis, he criticised those who asserted that a dead soul might be freed instantly from purgatory, and sort of introduced his idea of justification by faith alone, which eliminated purgatory because the dead were able to rest in peace on account of their faith, which made them right of God. rather than a payment to the church. And there's a particular phrase that the church, that when they were promoting indulgences, would say, and it was, as soon as a coin in the copper rings, a soul from purgatory springs. And that's what really upset Luther. And so that's what we're going to go into in the next episode, with the Protestant response to that. So I look forward to chatting with you then. Did you have anything just to say in closing, Billy?
One little thing that I remember that is from Augustine, where he used the Bible in Luke 12:59, where he says, I tell you, you will never get out till you have paid the very last copper. And that's where Augustine bases his view of purgatory.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, we'll unpack that a little bit more in the next episode. So thanks, Billy, and I look forward to joining with you then.
No worries. Thanks, mate. We'll see you around.